I was one of those people who, about 20 years ago, I put my parents out of my life and spend the next 20 years and raise my fist, paying those bastards back for what they did to me.
Yes.
And somewhere along the line, not so long ago, I realized that I didn't pay anybody back, of course. What I wound up was with 20 years with no parents. And during the process... During the process, one of the lines of my tape that came up in the story was, well, the thing that they really never did for me is they never showed me that they loved me. And that was very important. That was a key line. But the line suddenly meant something different to me this time.
Yes.
The line, they never showed me that they loved me, made me realize that I understood that they did love me.
You've just heard Kay Weinman, one of 3,000 people who were gathered with Werner Erhard at an all-day course about parents, which took place in 1976. You're about to listen to a series of moments taken from several such gatherings that were held in cities around the country. In addition to individual interactions and talks, these day-long events also included several processes or exercises which focus on various aspects of people's relationships with their parents. You'll have an opportunity to participate in one of these processes later in the tape. And now, Werner Erhard.
Now, the intention and purpose of this course is a context or a space in which to be and live that we're going to call completing your relationship with your parents, handling the source of your relationship. So the intention and purpose of the course is a context. That is to say, is the creation of a context, is the creation of a space in which you can be in life that we're going to call completing your relationship with your parents, handling the source of your relationships. The important thing about completing your relationship with your parents is that once you've completed your relationship with your parents, what does that mean? Once you have shifted, or once you have become aware of the context of being complete, once you are holding the content or the circumstances of your relationship with your parents in the context of being complete in your relationship with your parents, the instant that happens, you can begin to relate to others. And that doesn't mean that everything will be all right in your relationship with others. It means that for the first time in your relationship with someone else, you are actually working on what's in that relationship, instead of merely acting out or dramatizing what is incomplete in your relationship with your parents. It means you begin to really be able to complete other relationships. It creates the space in which to complete other relationships. You know, if in your house, if the stove goes bad, and you're trying to handle the stove by fixing the sink, it doesn't work well. You can fix the sink from now to doomsday. The stove isn't going to work. Well, if you've been working on the other relationships in your life, and your relationship with your parents is incomplete, you aren't really working on the other relationships in your life. You only think you're working on the other relationships in your life. You're actually working on the sink. You see, it happens spontaneously. Once your relationship with your parents is complete, you do work on the other. You do begin to complete the other relationships in your life. You just do. Because your relationship with your parents is complete. So that's the purpose of this course. That's the intention and purpose of this course, is to create a context or a space in which to be and live And we're going to call that context or space in which to be or live being complete in your relationship with your parents, handling the source of your relationships. So it's our intention to complete our relationship with our parents right now, today.
I wanted to ask you, why would I want to complete or continue a relationship with my mother, particularly when I wrote down my list of things? I fear her so. She has inflicted physical pain on me as a child, and I know that was a long time ago. And when I see her now, and I do that very rarely if I can,
Sure.
because pain continues. She's not physically anymore, but she kind of wipes me out, talks to me like a child, and I don't like that.
Yes.
I don't really know how to handle it.
I'm not suggesting that you end your relationship with your mother or continue your relationship with your mother. I'm suggesting that you complete your relationship with your mother. But let me go a step further than that. I'm suggesting to you, even more fundamentally than that your entire function as a human being is related to your fear of your mother. And that who you are, moment by moment by moment by moment by moment by moment, is somehow being dominated by, shaped, molded, at least limited by, corralled in by this incomplete relationship with your mother. See, your mother can be a monster, and you can have a complete relationship with her. Now, the appropriate way to relate to a monster is usually to give them a lot of space. Like they're moving elephants in here for the circus, you see? And if you know about elephants, a good thing to do with an elephant is you give it a lot of space. And so, see, I want you to get that completing a relationship with your mother will not make her less fearsome. It will simply get you off the string as a puppet of your fear of your mother. See, it's not that your mother's fearsome. It's that you're afraid of your mother. Your mother could be absolutely fearsome, and you would be perfectly all right, and might handle this fearsome thing by not getting too close to it. And that might be a very appropriate way to handle it. Or allowing it to be fearsome. You see, there's another side to this, Helen. Your mother hasn't been able to complete her relationship with you because she's somehow never gotten over to you that she's really fearsome. See, she's got a message in there that you have never gotten, really, because you're too busy being frightened. So she doesn't experience that you got her message. Now, I don't know your mother, and maybe she's not really fearsome, and when you give up being attached to being afraid of your mother, and when you give up that whole narrative about your mother, this, that, and the other thing, and you recognize that as all just what's so, and not necessarily having any influence on you, you may see that your mother is really a different way than you thought she was. She may be like, maybe she's very stuck on something rather than fearsome. So the point, to summarize the answer to your question, is that until you complete your relationship with your parents, your life is very much about your relationship with your parents unconsciously. And those kind of internal commands are made up of the stuff that's incomplete for you with your parents until you do in fact experience being complete with your parents. So there's the motive for doing it.
I understand everything that you said, and I agree with it, that it is running a great deal of my life and has. But I don't quite get, and I keep missing when you say completing.
Yes, that's because you hear continuing.
I want to know how, I don't, and I feel rather stupid because maybe everybody else in the room has understood. How do I complete it if I want to avoid it? I mean, I don't understand what the completing is.
Yes.
The semantics evades me.
Well, it's not really semantics,
Something.
or everything's semantics, and then it is, depending on which way we want to discuss it. But at any rate, the point is this. A thing is complete, Helen, when you can let it be. Anything which you aren't able to allow to be, you are therefore incomplete with. So, to give you a specific answer, and I could give 50 answers, but this is the answer that's appropriate to the way you asked the question. The way you complete your relationship with your mother is by allowing your mother to be exactly as she is. And when your mother when you are able, not when your mother is the way she is, because she is that, but when you are able to allow her to be that way, and to be responsible for your experience of her being that way, when you're able to allow your mother to be, then your relationship with your mother will be complete, because anything which you can allow to be will allow you to be. See, anything I can allow to be lets me be. So all you have to do is let your mother be.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Very nice. Beautiful.
Childhood is the focus in this next segment. Specifically, those moments in our relationship with our parents which have the most profound impact on the way we live. Incidentally, the training referred to is the S Standard Training.
I'm going to repeat or actually go over some of the material from the training. And remember that the purpose of the mind, once the self considers itself to be its mind, purpose of the mind is survival, you know? But then I'd like you to take a look from an infant's point of view about survival. First off, as an infant, your survival is as an infant, if you look out of an infant's eyes through the context of survival, if you look out of an infant's eyes through the organizing principle of survival, then you can see that for an infant, life is a very heavy survival game. I mean, there's this business about getting fed and getting your diaper changed and getting somebody to pay attention to you and being reassured that there's somebody around and making sure you're not going to fall. It's a very, very heavy thing. And obviously the people around who are involved and deeply embedded into those survival patterns are your parents. You are dependent on your parents literally for your survival. And that's a decision almost every infant has to make. I can't survive without my parents' support. I can't survive without my parents' support. I must have my parents' support. So that place in your life where your parents withdraw their support is enormously important to you. Probably you've got yourself riveted in that place. I mean, that's a gigantic upset. And at some point in everyone's life, their parents do withdraw support. You know, they don't let you get away with something. And that's seen as withdrawing support. They correct you when you make a mistake. That could be seen as withdrawing support. A brother or sister comes along and they don't pay much attention to you anymore. That could be seen as a withdrawal of support. They don't extricate you from some problem you get into. That could be seen as a withdrawal of support. When you make a mistake, they make you wrong for it. That could be seen as a withdrawal of support. If you get in trouble with somebody else, they don't back you up. They back the other one up. That would almost definitely be seen as a withdrawal of support. Kind of like when your survival's at stake and they don't back you up. You know, they don't somehow take care of you like they did when you were an infant. See, when you're an infant, it doesn't make any difference what you do, they support you. You know, I shared with people here the time I had accidents all during my childhood. And first one was when I was 3 years old. I fell, I don't know, a number of feet and crushed my skull and landed on my head, fortunately. And I had lots of accidents. I would have an accident once every year. I mean, a major accident, you know, like get run over or jam a ruler down my throat, something. Some major accident once a year. Finally, when I was I've forgotten how old I was, but I guess I was maybe 13, 14. I broke my nose with a lacrosse stick. Oh, it was great. I had blood all over the front of me, and my nose was, you know, like this. And I I walked home and my mother was pregnant and she was resting. And I walked into her bedroom where she was lying on the bed just kind of resting, and I said, I walked in, I said, I broke my nose. She said, I can see that. Get out of here and get it fixed. I never had an accident since then. Well, you see, it took me a long time to forgive my mother for withdrawing her support. Because there's an infant, it doesn't make any difference what you do, they support you, You can get dirt all over the place, vomit on it, and they love it. They'll support you. Some people are still trying that when they're 30 and 35. So at some place, there's an essential shift in the organizing principle in our relationship with our parents from one of being supported to one of not being supported. And I'd like you to be aware of that. I don't know that we'll specifically try to get when that happened or what the circumstances were or what the incident was, but I'd like you to be aware of it. It may come up for you during the rest of the day, or it may come up for you afterwards. It would just be nice to notice, oh my God, yes. My consideration was that my parents would support me no matter what. And when I was 13, that shifted. And I was really upset. And I've been dramatizing, acting out that upset with my parents ever since. I've never forgiven them for it. Now, the other part of it is that your mind, as you recall from the training, just records the pictures, just records the incidents. And then it brings those pictures or incidents out when something anywhere near like them comes up. Well, as an overall consideration, if you've got a picture in which you lost and somebody else won, and that gets reactivated, you will now play out the winner. See, when that picture gets reactivated, you don't play yourself. You get the other guy to play you, and you play the winner. And if you take a look at people's childhood, you see that their parents win all the time. You don't ever get to win. You don't ever get to be right when you're a kid, They're always right. And they're bigger than you are besides. They're always bigger than you are. And tougher and smarter, and they got more money and more friends, and they know more stuff. Now what happens is, this is a process, by the way, it's an eyes open process we're doing. See, there's certain processes you do with your eyes open and certain processes you do with your eyes closed. It's the eyes open part. What happens is that a lot of us decide that in order to survive, we have to be one of our parents. We absolutely make that decision. What I want you to find out right now is which one of your parents you are. See, I'm very clear about it. I was my mother for up until about 5 years ago. Actually, maybe 10 years ago. I was absolutely my mother. It was totally clear to me as a child that nobody in the world could survive unless they were my mother. I mean, my mother was the smartest, most able, most capable person I knew. Nobody ever beat her. Nobody ever got beyond her. Nobody ever got on top. My mother wanted everything. It was clear to me that the only way you could survive in the world was to be my mother. So I obviously became my mother, who I resisted and fought with and all that stuff. But never mind that. She was trying to be me. You know, once I decided that the only way you could survive was to be my mother, I had to be better at being my mother than my mother. I couldn't let her get in front of me. She might take over the job. So I became really good at being my mother. So I'd like you to discover which one of your parents you are. Who did you decide you had to be in order to survive? Might even be an older brother, or sister, or an uncle, or an aunt, or a friend who always won. Well, what we're particularly interested in here is, are you stuck in your mother or father's identity? Did you decide you have to be like your mother in order to survive in life, or you have to be like your father? Take a look at that and see if that's so for you. Which parent are you? Because there's another thing I'd like you to take a look at if you've got some idea of that. You don't really have to flatten that. I just want to create the space for that, you to become aware of that, and for that, as it happens, for you to have a space in which to be aware of it, both that and the withdrawal of support thing. The other thing has to do with sexuality between children and their parents. It's a forbidden experience to experience any sexuality between children and parents, and as Freud has already clearly pointed out, it's he thought it was, at least for a time, he thought it was the basis of a big part of the relationship between children and parents. What I'd like to be clear about with you is that, as far as I know, everybody experiences sexuality towards their parents. Everybody. A part of what I'm saying is that you bring patterns into the world with you of sexuality towards your parents. And usually those things manifest themselves in a very direct way. Small boys experience sexual feelings and sexual ideas about their mothers. Directly have those experiences, and have those thoughts, and have those feelings, and have those points of view and those attitudes. Now, of course, they are, almost invariably, have to be kept secret. They have to be suppressed and not allowed and hidden and all that stuff. What I'd like to do is to create the space for you to get in touch with your experience of your sexuality towards your parents. Allow you to experience whatever sexuality there was there or is there. I'm not making an endorsement for any expression of it. I'm interested in giving you the space to get in touch with what your actual experience is. And you got it. You got those experiences. Don't fool yourself. You do. So I just want to create the opportunity for you for that to be all right, for that to be there, for you to allow that to be, for you to let it be.
Werner addresses some fundamental issues about our relationship with our parents, issues which are relevant whether our parents are living or not. By the way, from time to time you'll hear him refer to conversations he's had with participants earlier in the day.
I wanted to tell you a little story which your sharing kind of reminded me of. I spoke, I guess, about 3-4 days ago at the Parent Effectiveness Training, the PET Trainers Convention, which was held in Amherst up in Massachusetts. And I talked about teenagers, and I told them that the most important educational experience in my life was the experience that I've had in the teen training. And, then I told them my things about I was an expert on teenagers now, And that the first thing that I wanted to share with them was that teenagers were human. And that did not go over there somehow. But I told them that what we found out in the teen training, what I found out in the teen training, is that absolutely the most important thing in an adolescent's life, absolutely the most important thing, is not going to the dance, not the romance, not the first romance, not school. None of that stuff is really important. At least none of that stuff is fundamentally important. That what was fundamentally important to a teenager was that they loved their parents absolutely. And the problem with being a teenager is the inability to express this, the inability to manifest it and communicate it and allow it and let it be there. And when I was all done, I got off the platform and some people came up to talk, and there had been two young people who were there obviously with their parents sitting over on my left, on the floor down in front of the seats in the auditorium. And they came over, and one of them had tears in her eyes, and she said, "I really want to thank you for saying that, because that's really, really what's true for me. And you having said that with my parents in the room gives me the opportunity, makes it okay for me to tell my parents that I really love them absolutely." And it was, it made that whole trip worthwhile. If nothing else had happened, that would have made that trip worthwhile. And I am so clear that what our lives are about when we don't get to express that, when we don't get, when a teenager doesn't get to express that, what it does is begin to twist the teenager. And it's interesting. You can see them getting twisted and gnarled and turned around, and you can watch them starting to put the film of peanut butter over all that gnarling so it looks good, so that they can be adults. And I'd been tied up all my life with all that stuff that I never completed as a teenager. So I didn't know that was what was underneath all of that. But the teenagers taught me that, and they taught me not by telling me, but by allowing me to share in the depths of their experience, to really get inside who they are, and to share who they are and who one is in relationship to one's parents is complete. That's who one is in relationship to one's parents. And then over top of it, as I say, is all this stuff. Now the secret is to simply get it to be the way it is. What happens is that we get off the way it is. We get tied into the stuff. We get tied into the problems. We get tied into the sadness. We get tied into the resentment. We get tied into the embarrassment, or whatever it is you've got going on with your parents. That's what we get tied into. And we lose touch with the context of that stuff. We get out of touch with the context. And the context is that you and your parents are related. Absolutely, completely, totally related. You can't be any more related than that. That's the source of relationships. That's where you as an individual come from. So it's important to begin to be clear what we're after here. What we're after is simply a recovery of the context of your relationship with your parents, and that context is that you are complete in your relationship with your parents. The question is, are you willing to get off it? That's what you want to take a look at. Are you willing to get off it with your parents? Are you willing to give up what you've been holding on to, what you've been dancing around? Your mother talks a lot. Your father doesn't understand you. They don't ever take any time with you. Whatever it is, look, you've got to see if you're willing to get off that, because that's all this is about. All this is about is being willing to give up whatever it is that you're holding on to, whatever it is that you're holding in place, whatever it is you're attached to, whatever it is you're dancing around in your relationship with your parents. That stuff's only there because at some point the absolute love and respect and admiration and total completion of your relationship with your parents somehow got threatened. So then you got something to hold on to. Now you ought to take a look at it right now. I mean, you really ought to take a look at it right now. And you ought to get clear with yourself about whether you are actually willing to get off it. Are you willing to give up whatever it is that you're holding on to? I know some of well, but he really did. I know he really did. Or, but she never. I know she never. That's not the question. The question is, are you willing to give that up? Are you willing to give up being right with your parents? You know, proving to them that you're pretty smart, that you know something too, that you're grown up, that they should have done it your way all along, that if they had raised you like you wanted them to, it would have turned out better. You've got to take a look and see if you're really willing to give that up, you know. If when that comes up, you are willing to let go of it. Are you willing to get off that when that comes up? Are you willing to create a context for the stuff in your relationship with your parents where when it comes up for you to be right and you find yourself being right, you are willing to get off it? Remember, getting off it is very threatening to people's survival. It'll make them right and you wrong. Are you willing to give up avoiding your parents' domination? You know, you're really willing to give that up. You're willing to give up conducting your relationship with your parents so as to prove to them that they don't have any hold on you anymore. Or that you don't have to. You're willing to give up proving you don't have to? I didn't say you did have to. I said, are you willing to give up proving you don't have to? You're willing to give up avoiding your parents' domination. That was a very beautiful thing the person who shared earlier talked about withholding well-being, you know, withholding their well-being. Here was a wonderful, lovely opportunity, and he withheld his well-being from his mother. That's the way to dominate your parents. Withhold your well-being. Tell them how lousy it is. Keep them concerned and worried and trying to help you. You're willing to get off justifying yourself with your parents? You're willing to get off and validating them as parents? Let them win? So that's really the question. You're willing to get off all that stuff. Can you give that up? Without being willing to give that up, there's no hope. That's the end of the ball game. You already know what you're going to get if you don't give that up. That's what you're going to get. You're going to get to be right. And you're going to get to make them wrong. You're going to get to avoid being dominated by them. And you're going to get to dominate them. And you're going to get to justify yourself and validate them and be self-righteous. See, you already know how good it's going to get. Because that's as good as it's going to get if you don't get off it. Now, some people think a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. If you get off it, you don't get anything, you see. As all you do is to validate or acknowledge the context of being complete in your relationship with your parents. You don't need anything from them anymore. You don't have to make them wrong anymore. You don't have to be right with them anymore. The relationship is complete for you just the way it is. It's all right. The question that goes along with that, and it's really very much the same question, are you willing to take responsibility for your relationship with your parents? Or do you have to blame them for it? Are you willing to be responsible for your own feelings in your relationship with your parents? If you felt unloved, are you willing to be the author of feeling unloved? Are you willing to switch the responsibility from out there to in here? Nobody can make you do it, and don't you make yourself do it. That'll just come back as guilt and burden and being wrong and shame. Just the question is, are you willing, not can you see that you are, but are you willing to be cause in the matter of your relationship with your parents? And that's the whole part of it. All those annoyances and upsets and petty bothers. Are you willing to come out of a space in which you are the creator of all of that?
Well, what I got to was that I'm very open with my mother, and I have a very free relationship with her in communicating. And with my father, I'm very embarrassed being with him. I want to hide all the time. I can't even look at him directly in the eyes when I speak with him. And I always said that, well, that's the way they relate to me. And I got that it's not them at all, it's the way I relate to them.
Yes.
And I also, there's another thing, I always compared myself, I always, judged a lot of things about them, and I always compared myself with them, and I always resisted being like them. I didn't want to be like them, I wanted to be like me. And what I got was, in the process, is that the way they are is really okay, and it's okay if I'm like them, and I love them very much.
That's beautiful. Do you get how important that is, what you just said, that if Mary spent her whole life, see, she said she didn't want to be like her parents, she wanted to be like her. But if that's the command you give yourself, that precludes any possibility of being yourself, because what you're doing is not being your parents. That isn't any different than being your parents. Not being your parents is exactly the same game as being your parents. There's no difference. So whatever you're resisting is determining your beingness. So Mary obviously just resolved the whole thing, that she's willing to be exactly like her parents creates the space for her to be herself. And the one thing you don't have to work at is being yourself. So all you need to do is to give yourself the space to be yourself. And then that's obviously who you are. Very nice. Thank you for that.
Next, Werner goes to the blackboard to demonstrate how we each possess the power to complete our relationships with our parents, and thereby alter the quality of our own lives.
Let's say that the context you've got right now for your relationship with your parents, the context, the space for the circumstances, and these are the circumstances, let's say. Here are the circumstances of the relationship with your parents. And they're all within this context. And the context, let's say it was possible for the context to be, my relationship with my parents is incomplete. Let's assume that it was possible for that to be your context. It isn't, and I'll demonstrate that soon. But let's assume that it was. And you said, no, my relationship is complete. Well, what you do is to smear completion over top of incompletion, because all you've got really is incompletion magnified or expanded. So that isn't the secret. I'm not telling you to invalidate or try to oppose or resist your point of view or your idea that your relationship with your parents is incomplete. No. I'm not telling you to deny what's so for you. If it's so for you that you're incomplete with your parents, fine, that's all right. Don't smear any peanut butter over that, for God's sake. What I'm saying is, take a step up in your abstraction and create a context in which The point of view that you are incomplete with your parents is simply another content. And the context is, I am complete in my relationship with my parents. Now, if you take a look at what must be true, I mean, just what of necessity is true, you can see very readily that, as a matter of fact, it must be true that you are complete in your relationship with your parents. I'll show you. Let's let the blank board represent nothing. You know, that nothing which is not something. I don't mean the nothing which is a hole in everything. I don't mean shove everything out and have a little hole in here. That's something. That's nothing. That's a nothing which is actually something. This is real nothing. This is nothing everything. That's the only way you can get real nothing. So this is the space to be, or this is the context of all contexts. Now, is it possible in this blank space into which you can create, to create not being related? So you can't start out with not being related. You can't start out with not something that ain't. You got to be not something that is. You can start out with is related, is related, and then over top of that you can put is not related. But you got to have is related before you can have is not related. You can't have is not something that doesn't exist. You get it? So in the creation of your relationship with your parents, if we take a look at your relationship with your parents all the way at the very beginning, it was complete in its inception. And everything else is therefore a content. Even the idea that you could be incomplete in your relationship with your parent is merely a content in the context of being complete in your relationship with your parents. So it's a matter of getting under your considerations, under the idea that it has to look this way in order to be complete. Or the idea, yeah, but I hate my mother. Or yeah, but I can't, every time I see her, I can't talk to her. Or yeah, but my father never calls me. So what? God, people I think it's so significant that their father doesn't call them. So all that is that your father doesn't call you. My father never told me he loved me. So what? So your relationship with your father is complete and whole and fulfilled and satisfying and enlivening, and your father loves you and he doesn't tell you. So what? The way your father expresses that he loves you is he doesn't tell you. See, if he didn't love you, he wouldn't have anything not to tell you. So that he isn't telling you is a demonstration that he loves you. It's not a very big one, but it's maybe the most your father can get together. Remember, he had a mother and father. From whom he learned to relate. But it's not your grandmother and grandfather's fault either. They had a mother and father too. When you trace it all the way back, it's you. I mean you yourself. I don't mean you, the name you got on. Makes for some very interesting relationships when you discover that. So the point is to get underneath your considerations. To get underneath your considerations to the space that's under there. Just the space, the room, the context that holds the considerations about what has to be or what shouldn't be or what ought to be or what's not good or yeah, but. So once you get underneath the considerations and the stuff and the yeah buts and the how abouts and the but if onlys and whens, once you get underneath all of that, then you have the space to create the experience, to create the context, to create the context of being complete, to create the space to be satisfied and fulfilled with what is in the relationship. See, nothing is inherently satisfying. Whatever the circumstances are, if you hold them in the space of being complete, they are satisfying. Do you hear what I'm saying? You don't have to change one damn thing. Not one damn thing. So all you have to do is to get in touch with the context of being complete. And then those same things which were bothersome to you, which were a problem for you, become a part of being complete. They produce satisfaction and fulfillment and aliveness. So once you get under it, you just create the experience of being complete. One of the things that we've really gotten totally clear about in the teen trainings and in the interaction with the parents and the teens is at the bottom of all family relationships is the fact that parents absolutely love their children and children absolutely love their parents. Now, there's never been an exception to that. And laid on top of that love is a tremendous amount of resistance and lies and irritation and resentment and hatred, all that stuff. And then having to hide that negative stuff barriers people against the experience of loving one another. In other words, it's just having to hide that stuff. You know, that someone talked about getting in touch with that they really hated their parent. It's having to hide that you hate your parents that keeps you from experiencing loving them. Can you get that? I mean, man, that's really paradoxical to the mind. It's hiding the negative stuff. It's not being allowed, it's not allowing it to be. Or if you do allow it expression, you become the effect of it. It's a no responsibility about the negative stuff. Look, you own it. Take responsibility for it. It's yours. You're welcome to it. And if you will take responsibility for it, if you will own the negative stuff, the barriers, the problems, if you will accept them and allow them to be and take responsibility for them, what you'll discover is underneath them is the experience of loving your parents and being loved by your parents. Again, I want you to be clear that it's hiding the negative stuff. And either hiding it by keeping it unconscious or out of the way, or suppressing it, or hiding it by being the effect of it. Gee, I wish it wasn't that way, and I'm sad. You know, that stuff. Instead of, I screwed it up! It's terrific! I will have great fun cleaning it up! Belongs to me, it's mine! So once you can stop hiding the negative stuff, once you can take responsibility for it and allow it to be, what it does is it takes you back to the context in which it's all being held. And that context is love. You know, and I mean love, just all that word implies and conveys. It's a really very powerful expression at that level. Incredibly powerful expression at that level.
Now you'll have the opportunity to participate in a process on forgiveness. While it isn't necessary to close your eyes during this exercise, we think you'll find it useful if you can.
I'm going to read the definition of forgiving out of the dictionary, and then I'm going to ask that it be put up on the screen so that you can read it as well. I'll have it run by twice. It's perhaps one of the most important and accurate definitions in the whole dictionary. One of the most powerful words in the dictionary. It's defined with great precision. It's a really beautiful word. You know, and people get all these funny feelings about it when you say the word forgive. I really want you to get clear on it. I want you to drop all those funny feelings you have of sympathy and whatever the heck it is. Really want you to get in touch with what forgive actually is. The first definition in the dictionary is to give up resentment against or the desire to punish. Stop being angry with. Pardon. So the first definition is to give up resentment against or the desire to punish. Stop being angry with or pardon. That's right out of Webster's New World Dictionary, word for word. The second one is to give up all claim to punish or exact penalty for. To give up all claim to... See, give up your right. That little, you know, you carried that resentment around, or that little thing around, or that upset, or that annoyance, or that thing that your mother or father did. It's like you give it up. Well, okay. You give it up. Give up all claim, all rights. You give up all claim to punish or exact penalty for. The synonym definition is forgive implies giving up all claim to punishment as well as any resentment or vengeful feelings. Incredible word. Okay, would you please close your eyes? While you're getting your eyes closed and getting settled, this process has the word what in it. And what is which one or which thing or which circumstance. It's used interrogatively in asking for a specification of the identity, quality, nature, etc. of a person or thing. So it's specifically which one, specifically which thing, specifically which circumstance. Okay, whatever's going on with you, will you just let it be? Just allow it to be. Fine. With your mother, what are you willing to forgive her for? Thank you. With your mother, what are you willing to forgive her for? Forgive is to give up resentment against, or the desire to punish, to stop being angry with, to pardon. Good. With your mother, what are you willing to forgive her for? Good. With your mother, what are you willing to accept her forgiveness for? Thank you. With your mother, what are you willing to accept her forgiveness for? To forgive implies giving up all claim to punishment as well as any resentment or vengeful feelings. Thank you. With your father, what are you willing to forgive your father for? Thank you. What are you willing to forgive your father for now? Thank you. What else are you willing to forgive your father for now? Good. And what are you willing to accept forgiveness from your father for? Thank you. What else are you willing to accept your father's forgiveness for? Forgiveness implies giving up all claim to punishment as well as any resentment or vengeful feelings. What can you forgive your parents for now? Thank you. What are you willing to forgive your parents for now? Good. And what are you willing to accept your parents' forgiveness for now? Thank you. Will you complete the process of forgiving, being clear about what you're willing to forgive your parents for and what you're willing to accept your parents' forgiveness for?
Hi, Werner.
Hi. You're the
Lisa.
last one to share.
Yeah. I went through a similar process, forgiveness process, in the teen training last summer. And I wrote down a whole list of things that I had to forgive my mother and my stepmother and my father for. And I came home wanting to tell them, and I did tell them, and I really didn't know, I didn't really experience that was completing it. And yet I thought that, I'd communicated it to them, and so it was okay. And today I experienced that it hasn't disappeared at all. And I still have this list of things to forgive them for. And what I thought of was I wanted to forgive them for creating upsets in my life, and I wanted them to forgive me for creating upsets in their life. And it doesn't feel real to me. And so the whole process, it was very strange. Because I didn't really get an experience. I got an experience, and yet I didn't get something which I really felt was real for me. And I don't know for sure that I'm willing to tell them.
Okay, well, first off, you want to be clear that you aren't required to tell them.
Okay.
You aren't even required to forgive them. The process is to discover whether you would be willing to forgive them. And one of the things that's very important to be clear about in processes is that processes are never pressing people in one direction or another. See, the purpose of the process is not for you to become willing to forgive your parents, but for you to discover exactly what you are willing to forgive your parents for, and exactly what you're willing to accept their forgiveness for. So what may have happened is that you may have been thinking that there was a right way to do the process or a wrong way to do the process. And perhaps what you discovered in this process is that you're unwilling to forgive your father and stepmother and mother for things. Or perhaps you're only willing to forgive them if they forgive you. Or whatever so. Was that it?
I'm not sure. Was
it that you were only willing to forgive them if they forgave you?
I really wanted to forgive them to get over that, to get rid of that so it would disappear. And I feel like they have stuff to forgive me for.
Yes. Are those two related or attached?
I don't know about the trade-off.
All right. At any rate, the point of the process is simply to discover what's so.
Okay.
And if you discovered that you haven't forgiven your parents and your step-parent for something, that's fine. That's what's so. And if you discover that you are willing to forgive them for some things and not for other things, or that you're only willing to forgive them if they forgive you, whatever is true works. See, what I think is right won't work.
Okay.
And actually, even though it's hard to believe, what you think is right won't even work. What you think is right will probably work a little better for you than what I think is right.
Right.
But even what you think is right won't work. The only thing that actually works in the long run is really telling the truth about things. It's just amazing. If I discover that I am unwilling to forgive you for X, and I really get in touch with the experience that I'm unwilling to forgive you for X, suddenly it begins to take care of itself, you know? Rather than saying, well, I certainly should. I mean, here I'm an upstanding citizen. I should certainly be willing to forgive you. See, that may all be true, but it has nothing to do with whether I do forgive you or even whether I'm willing to forgive you. So the real purpose, to summarize that, the real purpose of the process is just to discover the truth. And if you got a little bit clearer about what the truth is for you in the process, and the process worked. Thank you very much.
Thank you.